see if we can make the two spans look different. So one way, I know you guys did it in your homework, some of you at least, you folks I should say, is to use the style property. So I already have this span right here selected in my elements panel here. So that means that I can access it in the console with $0, right? You get that? I can't start typing $0 over here and have it do something, right? This is totally a DevTools trick. But it makes it really handy to experiment. So let's flip over here and let's fool around with that thing. So $0 is my span with Evans in it. So turns out every DOM element has a property called style. And through that style property, you can access every CSS property under the sun. So multi-word properties like background color. Since this is JavaScript, we camel case those instead of putting dashes in there like you do in CSS. The background color equals cornflower blue. Yeah, it totally works. Look at that. Woo! Or I could do something like, remember block versus inline? So spans are the generic inline element. What if I said $0.style.display equals block? Now they're on separate lines. Cool. So I could totally do this. What else could I do? Anybody do it differently? Anybody not use the style property? Yeah, what'd you do, Thomas?
I used the classList.add.
Haha, cool. So we could actually add classes to these things and use real CSS to style them. I like that. So let's see. $0.0.class. I have classList and className. ClassList is a DOM token list, whatever that is. ClassName is a string that has nothing in it. So let's find something that actually has a class. You know what? We don't have a whole lot of classes in here. We have class smaller on the input. Let's look at that. So let's look at input. Where is this? Here's the form. Here's the input with a class of smaller. So we know this has a class on it, right? So let's see how that looks. So now this is $0. It's $0.0.className. And I get the string smaller. Cool. $0.0.classList. Okay. So it looks like this DOM token list is kind of an array-like thing. Not technically an array, but it looks kind of like an array, complete with a $, with a square bracket 0 thing maybe. ClassList, square bracket 0. Totally. So he said ClassList add. Why not push? Well, it's not an array. That's why. Instead, we have add. So ClassList.add. And let's add the class pancakes. Why not? So then what do we see? Class, smaller, pancakes. So multiple classes on an element in HTML, you separate with a space, by the way. If you have multiple classes on the same element in HTML, you separate them by a space. So now my class list has a couple things in it. If I say class list $1, sure enough, I get pancakes. So what did that do to class name? Class name. There you go. The string now has space and the other thing in it. So class list is also does not go back quite as far as class name does. It used to be you had to just manipulate that string if you wanted to add a class to something. So why do we use add instead of push? Why isn't it just an array? Well, so that you don't add the same one twice. If I try to add smaller on there, smaller's already there, right? It's not going to add it twice. It's smarter than that. So push would not be smarter than that, right? It would very happily add the same thing more than once. So then when you tried to get rid of it, you wouldn't actually be rid of it, right? Because predictably enough, there's also class list remove. So I like it. Let's put a class on each of these things. So here's my Chris span. Before I set its text content, I will just say Chris span.classList.add. I'll add the class Chris. For the flick name, flick span.classList.add. I'll add the class name. So I kind of want a class in the LI itself. So what does each li represent? What does each item in the list represent? A flick, right? Each of those is a flick. So let's classify them that way. Let's do that here. Let's say item.classList.add flick. Let's see what this does for me. Does it work? All right. Black Hat. That's the name of the Terrible Hacker movie with Hemsworth. Black Hat Hemsworth. Let's have a look at this. There you go. Look at that. Got a class of Flick, got a class of Name, got a class of Chris. Totally works. Which would be spiffy if we actually bothered to style those any differently. So let's at least go in here and let's say anything with a class of Chris, we'll do display block, so it's at least on a separate line. Let's try that again. So let's see. Jurassic World, Fallen Kingdom. That stars Pratt. All right, cool. Pratt's on a separate line. Yay, we did it. So we changed the CSS, first using the style property, which you can do, and secondly by actually tweaking the class list, which lets us use real CSS, which is a little easier than messing with it in JavaScript, and it doesn't clutter up our code quite as much. Now, this handle submit function is still getting a little out of control and has an awful lot of repetition in it, but we'll deal with that in a minute. Cool. So what do we do here? Add class names to the elements we create. Don't forget to push. Groovy.